Hello, everyone. Welcome to Take Charge of Your Health and to our series, The Fashionable Christian. And the first episode... Okay, so the first episode is called A Peculiar People, What Sermon Do We Preach? And if you are joining me live today, I want to encourage you to type in your comments and questions in the YouTube live section, and I will do my best to answer them or address them today. If you are watching the recording, then I encourage you to send in your questions again at takechargeofyourhealth101@gmail.com. And I will start the next session by addressing the questions that we received. So all the details about how to receive updates on our upcoming presentations and events can be found in the description box. So again, encourage you to look in there. So during the sessions, we are going to be discussing our appearance, as you can tell from the title, and we're going to address how the issue of appearance affects our health, our physical health, our spirituality, and also what sermon we preach. So how we affect the spirituality of the people around us. So let's start with a word of prayer, and then we will get into the discussion. Dear Lord, we want to thank you very much for this opportunity that has finally come to discuss appearance and dress. And as Christians, we all need to be wondering how to reach as many people as possible. And we want to know how to preach a good message with our words, with our actions, and with our appearance. We thank you so much. We ask you to guide us as we speak and discuss, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so let's get into the discussion now. So as I said, it is titled The Fashionable Christian. And so we're going to discuss if that is a possibility, whether we can be a fashionable Christian or not. All right, so the presentation is a combination of the promptings of the Holy Spirit, my convictions, observations, research, and my experience as someone who's been on different spectrums of the issue. And the purpose of the presentation is not to judge anyone, but to stir our minds to answer some basic questions which will allow us to make good decisions for, like I said, our health, spirituality, and also to preach a good sermon. And to discuss issues that have to do with sacrifice, which is, I believe, the basis of our Christian walk, as well as righteousness by faith, as we will agree. And we can also agree that Satan has caused a lot of people in the church to frown upon this discussion of dress and appearance because of the views of certain group of, I guess, extreme people who have extreme and fanatical view on the issue of dress, which creates a big void for healthy discussion in Christian principles and educating the church on Christian principles, right? So these are important, and a beautiful balance should exist between obedience and faith. And we are going to discuss that in our future series coming up. Some Christians may love Jesus and have accepted him as their personal savior, and may genuinely appreciate the knowledge given to them to make good decisions when it comes to these principles. And maybe they have reached a conversion point where they are ready to apply these principles, and also not to bash anyone over the head with those principles, which is again very important. So to have a good basis for our presentation, let's just start with a quote from our health message, pages 429 to 430. And we read, "You cannot possibly change the heart. To get up a different style of dress will not do it. The difficulty is the church needs converting daily. Those who venture to disobey the plainest statements of inspiration will not heed any human efforts made to induce them to wear a plain, neat, unadorned, proper dress. To those who are making self their idol, nothing in the line of human tests should be presented, for it would only give them an excuse for making the final plunge into apostasy." So what we can understand from the quote is plain, neat, unadorned, proper dress is necessary. But if someone has made themselves their own idol, a human test should not be presented, because that can just give them an excuse to plunge into apostasy even further. And so we understand from this as well that we need wisdom. When it comes to these topics, we really need to pray for wisdom, for God to work in our hearts, that we can approach people the right way too. All right. So one of the questions to start with, questions that we need to ask ourselves is, when we say Christian, what image comes to mind? So again, I'm asking this question to stir our minds, because we know that as Christians, we have certain influence on people. And as good Christians, we need to wonder, how do we reach more people? How do we bring people to Christ? So this is not to judge anyone, but to, again, stir our minds to that. And I don't think when we close our eyes and imagine what a Christian looks like, I don't think that this image would come to mind. So the way we dress makes a difference when we go to an interview, and we want to dress to impress, right? When we go to an interview, we want to dress a certain way. When we go to a concert, again, we dress appropriately, a certain way. And when we go to a wedding, we try to, again, a lot of the times, wear the best dress that we have. And we also think about not wearing white so that we don't offend the bride. Is that right? So some Christians will say, but God looks at the heart, which is absolutely true. But we will also find that people do not look at the heart. We don't judge the heart. We are not supposed to judge the heart. So people look at the fruits of the Spirit. They can see our fruits, as we will see later. And our appearance also is a reflection of our heart. So if we are respectful in worldly settings, I would assume that we would more so try to be respectful in front of God and in God's eyes. So if we approach someone dressed this way and try to sell Christian literature or tell people about Jesus, I want us to think how receptive people would be to the message. As an unbeliever, I probably would ask, what's the difference between you and me? If you're dressed this way, just like me, why would I want to be like you? And when someone in general presents a message, the majority of people, if not all of us, we look at how they speak, how they behave, how they present themselves before we have the opportunity to judge their professionalism. So unbelievers and the world already puts Christians through magnifying glass, as we know. So this is about not minimizing the importance of the message, the good things we say, so that they don't disregard that as well. I was once told the story of a girl, which could be a little extreme, so just bear with me. A guy approaches an inappropriately dressed girl and makes inappropriate suggestion. And then the girl gets upset and says, "I'm not a prostitute." And he says, "Well, look, if I'm looking for a nurse, I am looking for the uniform. If I'm looking for a policeman, again, I'm looking for the uniform. So maybe if you don't want to be perceived as a prostitute, you should not be dressed like one." So again, whether we like it or not, we are perceived a certain way based on how we present ourselves. And I want to be clear about no type of harassment should be tolerated. If someone approaches you inappropriately, if someone thinks that based on your dress, they should be able to make inappropriate comments, remarks, or touch you, that is definitely not acceptable. But the fact is that our ignorance in the matter, our innocence will not save us a lot of the times. And what will save us is the knowledge and taking appropriate steps towards that, in that direction. And it's a health message as well. So in Matthew 7:20, we read, "By their fruits ye shall know them." And also Matthew 7, verse 17, "Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit." So again, this is what we see. This is what people see, the fruits of the Spirit. We don't see the heart. We're not supposed to judge the heart. So what about, again, let's think about if someone dressed modestly approached us, what our approach would be in that case. And I also want you to think about the fact that companies that represent the health message, or they have like a health promoting website or a health promoting program, they will have people dressed either in white or green with, again, the greenery in the background and happy people, families usually, right? So usually websites or programs promoting health, you won't see people dressed immodestly or in leather clothes and all of that. That's just how it is. That's just human mind perceives certain messages based on what they see. We are very visual creatures. So again, to reiterate what we are saying, sales representatives wear certain type of clothing for a reason, so that when they approach you, you can take them seriously as well. And we perceive them differently based on how they're dressed. Same with policemen, same with nurses. And I also want you to think about the earthly army. They wear specific uniforms with specific emblems and embroidery to represent their country. So basically, to show who their allegiance belongs to, who they pay allegiance to, who their respect belongs to. And I just want to tell you a story as well of a time when I was in a shopping center. So the playground area where our daughter was playing as well, there was a lady. We were watching our daughter, and this lady was looking after her granddaughter. So she was watching her granddaughter. And all of a sudden, we saw this lady frantically going around looking for her granddaughter. She couldn't find her. And we knew exactly who to approach very quickly. We looked for a security person there, and we approached the security person purely based on what he was wearing before, again, we could judge his professionalism. Okay. And also, again, to emphasize the importance of the dress, have a look at the statements from Letters and Manuscripts. Letter 24, page 1. The mother's dress should be simple, but neat and tasty. The mother who wears torn, untidy clothes, who thinks any dress good enough for home wear, no matter how soiled or dilapidated it may be, gives her children an example that encourages them in untidiness. And more than this, she loses her influence over them. They cannot help seeing the difference between her appearance and that of those who dress neatly, and their respect for her is lessened. Mothers, make yourselves attractive, not by wearing elaborately trimmed garments, but those that are neat and well-fitting. Let your apparel teach a lesson of neatness. You cannot afford to lose the respect of your children. Again, this is a solemn statement indicating that kids, this is children. If children can lose respect for you based on how you dress, just imagine how much the worldly people. And the point I want to make is that we need to be careful both at home, because husbands, if we are women, or if we are women, we appreciate our husbands dress neatly, but this is mainly talking about the mothers, because husbands also like the mothers to be dressed well at home. And the thing sometimes I find that people will say, I dress this way for myself, but for some reason they will not dress nicely at home, but it's like the makeup will go on and the nice dresses will go on when they are about to leave the house. So a lot of the times it is about appearing as attractive as male or female. We want to appear attractive, which is okay, but we need to be neat and not exactly attract the wrong attention of the opposite gender. So as I was preparing for this presentation, I actually came across a post made by Pastor John Lomakeng, and he titled his post, "If you want to be taken seriously, dress like it." And I quite liked what he had to say. So he says, in this day and age where sports announcers are dressing in suits and newscasters dressing in suits so that people can take them seriously, why is it that pastors who represent the Most High God are starting to dress like they are going to a baseball game? I've asked pastors about this, and they say they dress down so they could reach more people. So are they saying that the people on Sports Center or all of the other news networks should dress down so they could reach more people? Are we saying that the news networks should stop wearing suits so they could reach more people? The reasoning does not make sense. People dress that way because what they are communicating is important, and people that agree that they are communicating something important listen to them. Keep in mind, they are speaking about temporary things and earthly subjects. So, since I represent the Most High God of the universe, with the most important message, I believe I should dress like it. I've traveled to and spoken in more than 60 countries in the world, and I can tell you from experience how I dressed did determine how I was perceived. If I was called to speak in a casual setting or outdoors in a country setting, I would dress accordingly. However, my post is most relevant to what I see happening in our churches today. The reasoning behind it doesn't make sense. How you dress does not change your character, but it does signal the importance of the message you represent. This is a standard that I set for myself, and I do it based on my commitment to God, who is not common. To use this generation as an example in representing God is quite dangerous, because this is an ungodly generation. So if you want to be taken seriously, dress like it. Also, he had two quotes that I actually quite liked, and one of them is this: a minister who is negligent in his apparel often wounds those of good taste and refined sensibilities. Those who are faulty in this respect should correct their errors and be more circumspect. The loss of some souls at last will be traced to the untidiness of the minister. Look at how serious this is. The first appearance affected the people unfavorably because they could not in any way link his appearance with the truths he presented. His dress was against him, and the impression given was that people whom he represented were a careless set who cared nothing about their dress, and his hearers did not want anything to do with such a class of people. So it seems like it is actually the opposite way of what we think, that a lot of the times if we dress down, we're going to reach more people. I see I see the message of God. I see even God being attempted to be made common. I see preachers praying in a way as if God was their body, or hands in the pocket, still praying to God, but hands are in the pocket. I also believe that this is disrespectful and not acceptable. So the other quote that he made was, inappropriate dress can destroy your influence. Some who minister in sacred things so arrange their dress upon their persons that to some extent at last it destroys the influence of their labor. There is an apparent lack of taste in color and neatness of fit. What is the impression given by such manner of dress? It is that the work in which they are engaged is considered no more sacred or elevated than common labor, as ploughing in the field. The minister, by his example, brings down sacred things upon a level with common things. The influence of such preachers is not pleasing to God. Can you just type in the comments? I want to know what everyone thinks. Let's say a minister presents himself in church, is preaching in shorts and thongs and going around on the stage left and right, swinging his arms. A lot of the times that's what we see in churches today, and hands in the pocket and all of that. And I have also seen ministers praying and they start the prayer like this: hey God. I don't know, I even feel uncomfortable repeating that, but I would like to know your thoughts on this. So type in the comment section, what do you think about what we are discussing right now? Okay, so yeah, there's another quote. The minister must remember that favorable or unfavorable impressions are made upon his hearers by his deportment in the pulpit. His attitude, his manner of speaking, his dress. He should cultivate courtesy and refinement of manner, and should carry himself with a quiet dignity becoming to his high calling. Okay, unacceptable and disrespect, and unacceptable to disrespect God. Yes. So just bear in mind your comments. If you make a comment, if you don't want it to be displayed on the screen, make a comment individually. Send it to takechargeofyourhealth101@gmail.com, and that will be, I can read it, but whatever you typed on YouTube, I'll just display on the screen. If you want your comments to be displayed, we can do that. Okay, so another very important question to ask is, who decides the dress code? Is it the church or is it God? And I believe we should all be able to answer this question. So church rules, as we know, change, and culture rules change with times as well. And a lot of the times, church also follows culture. If we need to, again, answer this question, if God is the one making the rules, then they are applicable to every generation and all times. A minister one time said that the church many years ago used to be on the same level as the world in terms of principles, whereas today the church is lower in their principles and standards than the world used to be many years ago. So that is a very solemn statement, and that is so true, because if we compare ourselves with the world, if we compare ourselves with this generation, that is a terrible way of comparing ourselves. And we know that 2 Corinthians 10 verse 12 says, I'm going to read the whole verse. It says, "For we dare not make ourselves of the number, or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, but they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise." So there's no other way. It's not wise to compare. I've heard this before, that someone says, well, if that was the case, our church wouldn't be saved, because no one follows those principles that you are mentioning. And I've said, well, but look at what God says. Please stop looking at what the church does, because yes, I can see that back at home in Armenia, the culture is different. People eat differently. to how people eat here. So it is, a lot of the things are cultural. And I have also heard church members say, well, don't expect people to dress the way that you dress back at home, only assuming that I come from a conservative country, which is true, but that is true only 20 years ago. 20 years ago, my generation was very conservative, and my mom's generation also was very conservative. And again, I'll address those in future sessions, but that was true only 20 years ago. Now, a previously conservative generation somehow feels okay to wear crop tops, whereas before they wouldn't do that. The fashion when I was going to uni was that you wear low-cut pants, quite tight, and then you wear clothes that reveal your belly button, not belly button, but reveal some of the stomach. Now the fashion is that you wear high-waisted pants and you wear crop tops. How did it happen that previously conservative generation now feels okay to do that? And please remember that TV, Hollywood especially, but other media devices for years now have done an excellent job of numbing our sensitivity to the debasing cultural practices. So this is one of the reasons we don't watch movies, we don't go to theaters or movies, and even Christian movies. We have to be very selective and very careful about those things. And Dr. Clark is joining us today. So hi, Dr. Clark. He says the look of messy dress reflects a message like they don't care. Yeah, exactly right. And if at home we need to dress that way, imagine how much more, we need to be careful in church, because people come sometimes with magnifying glasses. Other times people come to see actually what the difference is between us and the worldlings. Church is not just another place to hang out with friends. Yes, that is true. Okay. And let's see, Spirit of Prophecy says in Spiritual Gifts, Volume 4, page 68, the distance is widening between Christ and his people and lessening between them and the world, which is very true and very sad at the same time. So, again, another question to ask ourselves is, what does it mean when the Bible says we are a peculiar people? Let's read a few verses. Romans 12, verse 12 says, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. And King James Version says straight and narrow. So this was Matthew 7:13. So Luke 9:23 says, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. And Matthew 10:37 says, he that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. The presentation is a little bit, the placing of the words and everything is changed a little bit. So bear with me. And we can see that there is a thread going about denying self daily. Just remember those words, daily and denying self. So if we don't think that a certain habit separates us from God and it is not an idol for us, a good question to ask ourselves is, can we do without it? And if we find ourselves finding excuses as to why we will not give up that indulgence or that habit, or that for some it may be family member that's a bad influence, or friend. For some it may be money. But if we can't give up that indulgence or that habit or that thing or that someone, then there is a good chance that we are paying homage to someone else rather than God. And if we are 100% committed, not half committed, we will stand out and be peculiar, as the Bible mentions. Okay, so other verses, 1 John 2:15 and 16 says, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world." Again, for us, we need to answer some questions. What is the pride of life? And the Bible doesn't say exactly, well, this is the pride of life, and it doesn't give us an extensive list of, well, if you do this, if you do that. That is something, again, that needs the prayers for the Holy Spirit to work in our hearts. We read in James 4, verse 4, "Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God." And John 15, verse 19 says, "If ye were of the world would love his own. But because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you." So does the world hate us, or does the world love us? Do we actually fit right in, or we can't have friendship with the world? That is the question. And again, Luke 16, verse 15 says, "For that which is highly esteemed among men is abomination in the sight of God." And we're going to go more into what is highly esteemed among men. And those are, again, things to think about. And this is a good time to actually remind everyone that I believe whether you are joining live or whether you watch the recording, there's lots of quotes that we need to go back and watch again and take notes. And my presentations are not so much about my opinion, but they are more about what God says and what the inspired word says, which is more important. So that's why there's lots of really good quotes here. And we read in Fundamentals of Christian Education, page 289, "When we reach the standard that the Lord would have us reach, worldlings will regard Seventh-day Adventists as odd, singular, straight-laced extremists." But isn't that a lot of the time what we are afraid of, to be looked at extreme, as odd, as strange? And again, that is not a standard which we should be striving for, to be looked as strange. When we dress, we shouldn't be thinking, how do I dress to be perceived as strange? But when we reach a standard that the God would have us reach, that is the natural thing that will happen. We're not going to be respected, and again, we can't be friends with the world. And the thing also to think about is that before the great trial comes with the death penalty, Satan is working to weaken our spiritual perceptions, whether it be Seventh-day Adventists, whether it be other genuine Christians, through conformity to the world, little by little, day by day, so that when the real trial comes, we will not find it difficult to make the final step towards apostasy, complete apostasy. And also, what percentage of God's people will be saved? What percentage of professed Christians will be saved? We see throughout the whole Bible that the majority is not the group that is saved, right? So it will be the minority. Okay, so we read in Testimonies, Volume 5, page 78, "Our only safety is to stand as God's peculiar people. We must not yield 1 inch to the customs and fashions of this degenerate age, but stand in moral independence, making no compromise with its corrupt and idolatrous practices." This is again another solemn statement. And we need to remember, Satan has had 6,000 years to master this. He has had a lot of time to actually work with human mind and figure out what we respond well to. And just remember as well that fashion a lot of the times is dictated by the queer culture and mostly gay men. So that is a question we need to ask ourselves. Do we want our style of dress to be dictated by this group, or we want to be influenced by a different spirit? We read in Testimonies, Volume 4, page 647. Fashion is deteriorating the intellect and eating out the spirituality of our people. Obedience to fashion is pervading our Seventh-day Adventist churches and is doing more than any other power to separate our people from God. I mean, this is as serious as it gets when we read more than any other power to separate our people from God. And again, we're going to see exactly how that is being done. And this was, mind you, the problem of 100 years ago. Just imagine, when she was writing, this is almost 150 years ago, she was not talking about the miniskirts or the popular style of dress that we have today. Fashion changes and Satan comes up for every generation with something immodest or unhealthy or something, again, that's going to separate us from God. It's either the low-waisted pants or the high-waisted pants, doesn't matter, but he suggests something that is immodest or unhealthy. In the time when Ellen White was writing, they were wearing very tight corsets and the hoops under the skirt and all of that. We will address that as well. So that's what she's talking about. All right, so we read in Testimonies, Volume 1, pages 608 to 609. I would say that we are living in a most solemn time. In the last vision given me, I was shown the startling fact that but a small portion of those who now profess the truth will be sanctified by it and be saved. Many will get above the simplicity of the work. They will conform to the world, cherish idols, and become spiritually dead. So again, just lots of questions to ask ourselves, but one of them is, how is this going to be determined? How am I going to go from professing the truth to cherishing idols? And one of the idols, maybe you can't see very well, but these are girls taking selfies. I mean, one of the idols is the self-indulgence, self-worship these days, which we don't realize that just because we don't have wooden or clay idols in the home doesn't mean we're not worshiping something that might actually be ourselves. So we read also in Prophets and Kings, page 188, the time is not far distant when the test will come to every soul. The observance of the false Sabbath will be urged upon us. The contest will be between the commandments of God and the commandments of men. Those who have yielded step by step to worldly demands and conform to the worldly customs will then yield to the powers that be, rather than subject themselves to derision, insult, threatened imprisonment, and death. And that time the gold will be separated from the dross. True godliness will be clearly distinguished from the appearance and tinsel of it. Many a star that we have admired for its brilliance will then go out in darkness. Those who have assumed the ornaments of the sanctuary but are not clothed with Christ's righteousness will then appear in the shame of their own nakedness. So some of the points that I've highlighted is that those who have yielded step by step. So the compromise slowly creeping into the heart, the lies slowly creeping into the heart, until when the last test and trial comes, we will actually yield and give in. We may wonder today, what will make us change our mind in the last days? So the preparation today, every day, fasting, praying, saying no to the worldly customs, whether it be dress, whether it be diet, whether it be where we go for entertainment, what we watch, all of these things determine today what our final answer is going to be in the last days. Cherished pride of life and self will not allow us to give up our lives and comforts in the last days. When the final trial comes, we will not only depart from the truth. Remember, we're going to turn against God's people. So it is almost unbelievable today, but it's happened in the past. It has happened just recently. In the last few years, it's happened when nice, kind-hearted people that we could see turned against each other because of the differences in opinion about whether certain things should be taken or not. You will understand what I'm talking about. And it's going to happen again in the future in the worst way possible. We can't even imagine. And it would be naive to think that the acceptance of the seal of God or the mark of the beast is just going to depend on just saying no to it when it comes in the last day. So as we said, it is the preparation work. So even in university, right, when I was studying, the test we do, even in school, we know that the final test we do is not just doesn't just reflect our knowledge in that test. It reflects our knowledge for the whole year of what we've been studying. And when I went to uni, I got a degree for my studies which has only 1 mark for the English subject, for example. And that mark is a reflection of how I did the whole year. Again, in the world, that is different. It's not like a big reflection of it, but there's only 1 mark. But it should be a reflection of how we did the whole year. And we didn't have students in our university that just scraped through the 4 years and did great in the final exams. The ones that worked hard throughout the whole year, those were mainly the ones that got good marks in the end as well. Okay, Dan says, and inappropriate dress has been creeping in our churches for years, just like the verse said, step by step. Yes, absolutely. So we read again in Great Controversy, page 6. Let me see which one was this. Page 608. As the storm approaches, a large class who profess faith in the third angel's message but have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth abandon their position and join the ranks of the opposition. By uniting with the world and partaking of its spirit, they have come to view matters in nearly the same light. And when the test is brought, they are prepared to choose the easy, popular side. Men of talent and pleasing address, who once rejoiced in the truth, employ their powers to deceive and mislead the souls. They become the most bitter enemies of their former brethren. When Sabbath keepers are brought before the courts to answer for their faith, these apostates are the most efficient agents for Satan to misrepresent and accuse them, and by false reports and insinuations to stir up the rulers against them. Again, some really solemn statements, and this one especially, if what we understand from here, who have professed faith in the third angel's message but have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth. So if the profession of our faith is not sanctified by obedience to the truth, and the truth is not revealed in your life, that is what going to determine in the last days whether we abandon the ranks of God's people and turn against them, or we stick with our principles. So that's when the pressure builds up. That's when it will really show what we are made of. When our life is on the line, we will not only give up our faith, but again, we will join the opposition. Note that it says they are prepared. So again, day by day, the preparation work does not happen just overnight. We don't just say yes or no in the end. We are preparing every day. Okay, so in the last days, there will not be any flexible Christians, any neutral Christians. It's going to be the peculiar ones and the ones who join the enemy. And if we are afraid to compromise our reputation, and it's mainly about reputation and our appearance today, when there is no threat to our lives, the only thing is under threat is our reputation. What will people say about me if I dress this way? We are not going to tolerate ridicule or especially imprisonment, threat to our lives. I would not think that will happen if we are afraid today. Okay, as we are nearing the end of our presentation, let's read Testimonies Volume 1, page 278. The warnings that worldly conformity has silenced or withheld must be given under the fiercest opposition from enemies of faith. And at that time, the superficial conservative class, whose influence has steadily retarded the progress of the work, will renounce the faith and take their stand with its avowed enemies, toward whom their sympathies have long been tending. These apostates will then manifest the most bitter enmity, doing all in their power to oppress and malign their former brethren and to excite indignation against them. This day is just before us. So the extremes in both ends, just imagine the ones that haven't done much but have actually retarded the work, contributed to actually the of retardation of the work. They will actually not only renounce the faith, again, they will take a stand with its avowed enemies and see toward whom their sympathies have long been tending. So maybe today we are not showing that we pay allegiance to the enemy. And just remember that in the last days, when persecution starts, those who are going to be persecuting are going to think that they are doing God a favor. They are not going to think, well, we are on Satan's side and these are Christians and we're going to persecute them. No. Okay. Testimonies, Volume 5, page 216. Those who are uniting with the world are receiving the worldly mold and preparing for the mark of the beast. Those who are distrustful of self, who are humbling themselves before God and purifying their souls by obeying the truth, these are receiving the heavenly mold and preparing for the seal of God in their foreheads. See how it's in continuous test, uniting, preparing, humbling themselves. So again, this is a preparation work. So the test is, if it was just for the Sabbath day, we would probably not need the whole Bible. And maybe this is an extreme statement. Let me know what you think about it. Again, you can write in the comments section. But I believe, what is the purpose of the whole Bible if the test is just for that Sabbath day or the mark of the beast? We have the message of love, humility, and self-sacrifice throughout the whole Bible. So this in the end comes down to the fact that whether we are going to put our own self aside and stick with the principles of God, or we have made ourselves our idol, our God, so much so that we will then turn against God. Because in the last days, remember, there will be no Holy Spirit intervening, and Jesus will not be intervening for us, and we will just basically stand before God alone. Okay. So we read in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, page 188, I was shown that the people of God should not imitate the fashions of the world. Some have done this and are fast losing the peculiar holy character which should distinguish them as God's people. So, by imitating the fashions of the world, we are fast losing our holy character which should distinguish them as God's people. In these last days, fashions are shameful and immodest. They are noticed in prophecy. They were first brought in by a class over whom Satan has entire control, who, being past feeling or without any conviction of the Spirit of God, have given themselves over unto lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. If God's professed people had not greatly departed from him, there would now be a marked difference between their dress and that of the world. Just and pay attention again. This is 150 years ago. What would be said about the dress now? It's defiling our holy character because we are actually doing what the world is doing. And here again, I want to emphasize, if God's professed people had not greatly departed from him, there will be a marked difference between their dress and that of the world. So if there is no difference between our dress and that of the world, can we conclude that maybe we are far from him? Maybe that is the reason why our dress is no different from the world. So I will be able to answer maybe a few questions because we have 1 hour mark. If you have any questions, please send them to me and we will address them. I believe we should have a little bit of time before we close this session. So you can send in your questions and comments if you want them to be addressed on this session. If not, again, send them to us at takechargeofyourhealth101@gmail.com, and then I'll just reply to you later. Okay, so the last Bible verse that I'm going to read is Luke 9, verse 23. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Again, the word daily comes up. So it is a daily preparation. And what Jesus is trying to say here, I believe, is that every one of us needs to battle with something that self doesn't want to surrender. For some, again, it may be jewelry. For others, it may be our children, our family members, and for some it's money. And when I say family members, I'm not saying we need to give up our connection with our family members. We need to know where our limit is, past which we are being affected and influenced by certain habits. So I love my family members very much. I love my kids very much, but there are things that come in conflict with your principles that you have to say no. And the love of our family and friends need not to stand between us and the principles that God has given us. And we are going to talk more about these things in our future sessions. And the last quote of the session is, it is always interesting, and this is from Joe Cruz's book, Colorful Cosmetics and Jewelry. And this is the book also that I really recommend while we are studying, and also after the sessions. Please read this book because he's got very good information about not just jewelry. The title is Colorful Cosmetics and Jewelry, but it's just a really nice book about self-sacrifice. And I'll tell you what other books I recommend reading after. It is always interesting to see how the truth weeds people out of an evangelistic audience. No one drops out until we present the claims of God that demand a change of life and practice. If we did not preach all the counsel of God, most listeners would gladly respond to the invitation. Struggle takes place when the truth challenges a darling self-indulgence. The test of the Sabbath, tithe, and diet are all aimed at some element of self-nature. Many fail on each of these points. But strangely enough, the greatest battle seems to ensue when God's will touches the area of personal pride. Vanity is deep and pervasive. Self-love has 1,000 faces and exhibits itself in as many subtle ways. I mean, how true is that? We can teach about diet. Some people will say no, others will say yes. We will do that. But when it comes to, the self, how we are perceived, and the dress, when it comes to vanity, we are that is a real challenge for a lot of people. So, and yeah, vanity exhibits itself in many subtle ways. So what we discussed today was the importance of dress and the influence it has. And I think it is important to emphasize how important dress is, and then we will go from there. And not just dress, but appearance. We are going to go from there now and discuss the health side of things and the damaging influence. We also talked about the damaging influence fashion has on us as Christ followers. We'll talk more about it during later sessions. Our intentions and heart are reflected on our appearance. So these were some important issues that we touched on, so that we have an idea that even though, yes, God looks at the heart, our heart still reflects on our words and actions and everything. So I also want to mention this one point before we close, that there are people, and I can think of one occasion when someone was just using profane words, just negative words, and I told them, I said, that's just not nice, you're not supposed to use those words. And they said, well, my heart is clean, my heart, there's no guile, there is no like negativity in my heart, my heart. And I said, well, where are those words coming from, you think, if your heart is clean? So it is just an excuse, and if our hearts are clean, our words and actions and appearance will also bear witness of it. A lot of the times we either hide something with our appearance, I believe, or we actually reveal something. And again, I'm talking as someone, like I said, who's been on different spectrums of it. And next time we are going to talk about my personal experience, like I told you, with appearance, dress, and jewelry. And I have gone through many changes, and you would, I think, want to hear that. And we want to again talk about faith and obedience next time. And we are also going to touch on jewelry. The aspect of appearance we'll talk about is jewelry. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. We have one last comment, I think, that we can address. It is a sad fact already prophesied in the Bible that few people will find salvation. Either we are lovers of the world or we are lovers of God. We cannot love both. That is true, and that's what the Bible has said. We cannot serve two masters. Either we will despise one and love another, or it will be the other way. There is no middle ground. So that is something to remember. So I want to thank you very much for your participation, for joining me today. Please remember, every Sunday we will have one session. It will go for an hour or less. I will be able to address your questions and comments as time allows. And every session will be 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time or Brisbane time every Sunday morning. And we really appreciate your prayers and support in the work that we're doing. Please remember, we don't have much time. As I have said before, we have never had so little time in which to do so much. So please share the presentation with others, with your friends and family who you think will benefit, and please pray as you do that. Let's exercise discretion as we share the good news with people, because we never know where they are in their Christian walk. So thank you so much. May God bless you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.